Have you ever stood in your own home, surrounded by people who came to mourn, yet felt like a stranger at your own husband's funeral? That was me, Charlotte Dawson, on the day I laid Matthew to rest. And that was the day my only son whispered words that cut deeper than the loss itself. "Mom, don't dare touch Dad's estate. It's mine now." Before I begin, let me say this. If you've ever felt betrayed by the very people you raised, if you've ever watched greed strip away love from your own family, then this story will touch your heart. Please, take a second to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know where my story reaches tonight. I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, and for 59 years, this city has been my heartbeat. Matthew and I built our life here, brick by brick, business deal by business deal. Together, we started in real estate when we were barely scraping by. He managed the numbers, and I handled the people. While other couples were spending weekends on vacations or dining out, we were painting rentals ourselves, fixing leaking roofs, and negotiating contracts late into the night. It wasn't glamorous. In fact, it was exhausting. There were times when I sat in our small kitchen, counting out grocery money and praying we'd make it through the month. But slowly, our sacrifices paid off. A duplex turned into an apartment building turned into a block of houses, and by the time Matthew's health started to weaken, Dawson Properties owned assets worth more than $42 million. To outsiders, we looked like a success story. To me, it was more than money. It was proof of our devotion, our grit, and the countless nights we spent holding each other, dreaming of something bigger than ourselves. When Matthew passed, the earth shifted under my feet. He had been sick for some time, but nothing prepares you for the silence that follows. The house felt cavernous without his voice echoing in the hallways. People filled our mansion that day, offering casseroles, handshakes, and condolences, but none of it touched the hollowness inside me. What pierced me, though, wasn't grief alone. It was the hushed voices of my son, Noah, and his wife, Amy. While I clutched Matthew's folded handkerchief in the chapel, they leaned close in the back pew, whispering like children caught with candy. "Now it's all ours," Amy murmured, her lips curling into a smile. Noah nodded, eyes gleaming with the kind of arrogance that Matthew always warned me about. I froze. My own son, my flesh and blood, spoke about his father's death as if it were a business transaction. I told myself I'd misheard, that grief makes people strange. But later, when we returned to the house and guests were still milling about, Noah approached me directly. He placed a firm hand on my shoulder, lowered his voice, and said, "Mom, don't dare touch Dad's estate. He left it to me. You should just rest now. Pray. Be thankful. Let me handle everything." My knees nearly buckled, not because of the words, but because of the certainty in his tone. As if I had never stood beside his father in every negotiation. As if I hadn't signed contracts, fought for tenants' rights, or stayed awake balancing the books when Matthew's heart was too weak to continue. Amy, standing a step behind him, chimed in sweetly. "You don't have experience running a business this size, Charlotte. It's better for everyone if Noah takes control. We'll take care of you." Take care of me. The words tasted like poison. I was 59, not 90. I had built this empire with Matthew. Yet in their eyes, I was a relic, a weak, grieving widow who could be shoved aside like a worn-out chair. I didn't argue, not then. Grief has a way of disguising fury as silence. I nodded, folded my arms, and let them think they'd already won. That night, when the last guest had left and the house was quiet again, I passed by the study door and heard voices. Noah and Amy were inside, their whispers sharp. She'll sign whatever we put in front of her, Noah said. She's too tired to fight. We'll show investors the draft, and by the time the will is read, we'll already have deals locked in. Amy laughed lightly. She doesn't even know half of what's in the files. We just need her to believe she's weak. It won't be hard. And then came the dagger. She's old, Noah said flatly. She's easy prey. I pressed my back against the wall, my heart pounding so loud I thought they might hear. Easy prey. That was how my son described me. In that moment, the grief in my chest hardened into something else. Resolve. The next morning, I called John Hale, our longtime attorney and one of Matthew's dearest friends. He met me in his office, his weathered hands folded across a stack of documents. He already knew. Charlotte, he said gently, sliding an envelope toward me. Matthew anticipated this. He sealed his will, left instructions, and... Here John paused. He left you a personal letter. My hands trembled as I opened it. Matthew's handwriting spilled across the page, strong and steady despite his illness. My dearest Charlotte, if you are reading this, I am gone. But know this. I trusted you with my life, and I trust you with what we built. Our son has his charms, but he is not ready. Protect our legacy. Protect yourself. Play the widow if you must, but never let them strip you of your strength. This company is yours. Stay vigilant. I love you always, Matthew. Tears blurred the ink, but I felt a fire ignite inside me. Matthew had seen it coming. Noah's hunger, Amy's scheming, and he entrusted me, not them. For the first time since his death, I felt more than grief. I felt purpose. That day, I made a choice. I would let Noah believe I was fragile. I would let Amy think she was outsmarting me. I would bend, but I would not break. Because this was not just about wealth. It was about everything Matthew and I sacrificed for, everything we built together. And I would not let my son reduce it to ashes of greed. Grief made a careful mask, and I wore it like silk. I left the curtains drawn, let the flower arrangements wilt in their vases, and spoke softly when people called. When Noah and Amy arrived the next morning with their bright plans and hushed urgency, I made tea I never intended to drink and sat with my hands folded like an obedient widow. Mom, Noah said, touching my arm with rehearsed tenderness. We'll take the weight off you. Just sign a few things. It'll make transitions smoother. Transitions, I echoed, as if trying the word on my tongue for the first time. Of course, darling. Your father always wanted... smooth. Amy leaned forward, smile flawless, eyes sharp. Exactly. For example, the Austin villa, keeping it costs money. Better to liquidate and stabilize cash flow. She slid a folder toward me. Here's a simple letter of authorization, so you don't have to worry. I opened the folder, letting my fingers tremble. The paper was nearly perfect. Letterhead, signature line, even a faux watermark. Nearly perfect, except the phrasing granted far more authority than any simple letter should. It would have unlocked listings, escrow, and wire approvals, all without my review. Oh my, I whispered. So many lines. You know I get confused, dear. I closed it gently. Would you mind if John looks at this? Just so I don't make a mistake. Their faces remained pleasant, only their jaws tightened. Amy recovered first. Of course, Charlotte. Whatever makes you comfortable. It was the first small win. Not a victory, just a stitch in a much larger seam. I called John Hale as soon as they left the room. He picked up on the first ring. They're moving quickly, I said. So do we, he answered. I've scheduled the will reading for 10 days from now. Private, at your home library. Meanwhile, I'm assigning a forensic accountant, Evelyn Park. She's discreet, And I want to lock down corporate access. Dual signatures on wires, notarization required for any property transfer, audit logs turned on. Matthew already required dual signatures above 50,000, I said. But they might try to circumvent with new accounts. Then we'll alert the banks, John said. And Charlotte, his voice softened. You don't have to be brave every hour. I can do brave, I replied. But I need to be believable too. The performance began. I went into the office wearing a black cardigan, pearls, and a faraway look. I carried peach cobbler, the kind the staff remembered from birthdays. People hugged me in the hallway, and I let them. Some had been with us 20 years and knew the cadence of our seasons. Acquisitions in spring, lease renewals in summer, capital improvements before winter. They also knew who actually kept the machine running. Ms. Dawson, said Denise Morales, our controller, meeting me in the corridor. Her voice lowered. I'm sorry for your loss. Then quieter. We're with you. Denise had a spine made of tempered steel and a brain that balanced numbers like a maestro balances sound. I asked for a tour of how things were going, just so I can feel useful. And while Noah paraded through conference rooms, introducing himself as de facto chief, Denise quietly set up nightly financial snapshots, routed to a private folder only I and John could read. Our IT lead, a kind, nervous 20-something named Devin, enabled version histories on every shared document and restored access logs Matthew had turned on during his last hospital stay. I watched as Noah held court in the glass conference room, charming as a Sunday pastor. Investors drifted in, men who measured worth in square footage and cap rates. Amy played the perfect hostess, hand to the elbow, a knowing laugh, the right name remembered at the right moment. They told a story of momentum, of honoring Matthew by updating our structure. New holding companies, fresh partnerships, faster exits. It would have almost sounded noble if I didn't hear the hum of greed vibrating beneath each sentence. They needed one thing: me. My name was woven into filings and authorizations, my signature the key that made vaults swing open. So they courted me, lunches I didn't want, flowers I didn't need, and documents I pretended not to understand. Just an initial here, Mom, Noah said in my study one evening, laying out a power of attorney with gauzy language and a camouflaged clause the length of a snake. Power of attorney? I blinked. Only so you can pay small bills, dear? Like the gardener? I don't want to burden you. Exactly, he said, eyes bright. Little things. Then make it little, I murmured. A limited one, for 90 days. No property transfers or wires, just bills and routine expenses. He hesitated. Amy stepped in. That's reasonable, she said smoothly. Noah, draft it tailored for your mother. They brought a new document the next morning. Tight, precise, the devil tucked away in a definitions section and a cross-reference. John and I had prepared for this. He created a mirror document, nearly identical but stripped of dangerous passages, and sent it through our notary. When Noah pushed the pages across my desk, I put on my reading glasses, took a long breath as though every letter were heavy, and signed John's version. Thank you, Mom, Noah said, relief spilling into his voice. Amy kissed my cheek. You won't regret this. I smiled sadly. I already regret so much. Evelyn, the forensic accountant, moved like a shadow. She spoke softly and asked for everything. Within 2 days, she'd mapped a scatter of suspicious payments, vendor invoices routed to LLCs created in the last 6 weeks, with names so bland they practically dared you not to notice. Maintenance Solutions of North Texas. Capital Growth Advisors, both tied to a mailbox near a strip mall, and a registered agent who shared an address with a firm Amy had contracted for investor outreach. Nothing huge yet, Evelyn said, showing me a printout. But these small pipes are usually how the big pipeline gets built. Devin, emboldened by Denise's steady presence, found something nearly as valuable as money: metadata. A Word document labeled Last Will Draft V7 had been saved and resaved from Amy's laptop, passed to Noah, then to a printer in Conference B at 9:12 p.m. 3 nights after the funeral. The document's author field made my stomach twist. An outside consultant we'd used once for branding. The draft, as far as I could tell from a preview pane Devin pulled up without opening it, redistributed control in a way Matthew would never have allowed. "Don't open it," I said. "Just keep the logs. And Devin, store copies somewhere safe." His cheeks flushed. "Yes, ma'am." We weren't breaking into their secrets. We were simply capturing the footprints they left behind. Noah tried to sell Austin first. It was Matthew's favorite: stone arches, live oaks, a sliver of blue pool between rooms that smelled like cedar in summer. Escrow opened under a shell company. A preliminary letter of authority appeared in the buyer's file, bearing my name in a slanted signature a stranger might have believed. But our title company had worked with me for 15 years. They called Denise. Denise called John. John called me. "Decline to confirm," John advised. "No accusations yet. Let them make the second move." They did. A wire request hit the bank at 4:03 p.m. on a Friday. $475,000 labeled pre-closing maintenance. It bounced off the dual signature rule Matthew had installed like a guardrail on a mountain road. Noah stormed into my sitting room at 6, red-faced beneath his perfect tan. "The bank needs your cosign. Do you want the property to rot? This is time-sensitive." Amy stood a half-step back, lips pressed tight. She had the sense to be embarrassed, even if only by timing. I set aside the knitting I'd taken up solely for theater and met my son's eyes. "Darling, you told me I should rest. I am resting. We'll do everything properly on Monday." "Properly?" He laughed without humor. "You don't understand speed." "I understand permanence," I said softly. "Your father did too." The staff began to choose, as people always do in storms. Most chose quietly. Rosa, who tended the houseplants and knew every stain on the kitchen island, brought me receipts she'd been asked to sign for deliveries that never happened. The new executive assistant, hired 3 weeks before the funeral, stopped looking me in the eye when I passed. I didn't push. Divided loyalties reveal themselves in time. I let Amy see me nap on sofas in mid-afternoon. I asked Noah to explain acronyms he'd learned last week but wore like epaulets: IRR, NOI, capstacks. He smiled too widely every time he defined them, and I nodded as if hearing fairy tales. Humility is a language men like my son don't believe their mothers speak. They forget who taught them to tie their shoes. At night, I sat alone in the library Matthew loved. Walnut shelves, a ladder that squeaked, a globe bar with a tiny ship painted in the Atlantic. I read his letter again until the paper felt warm. Play the widow if you must. I wasn't sure if he'd meant it as permission or a dare. Either way, I took it as a plan. John and I scripted the next steps: a legacy evening at the house to honor Matthew's life, invitations to the board, senior staff, and a curated list of investors Noah had been courting. Flowers ordered, catering simple, valet arranged. On the agenda, tucked in the middle of the printed program between remarks from family and a toast to our team, was an item innocuous to anyone not looking closely. Formal reading of testamentary documents. Legal words that carry the weight of a falling gavel. "Will they suspect?" I asked John. "They suspect everything and nothing," he said. "Greed fogs judgment. Besides, they think you're tired." I looked at my reflection in the library window. I did look tired. Some of it wasn't an act. 2 days before the event, Denise came to me with a file and eyes that glittered with something like triumph. "They sent this to a prospective partner in Houston," she said, laying down a printed deck. "Slide 12 references a draft will that clarifies succession. They're using it to promise control and sweeteners." "Do we know which partner?" I asked. She smiled. "The one who worked with us during the Oak Terrace purchase. He called me and said, 'Denise, I don't know what's going on over there, but somebody's selling futures on weather that never comes. He'll be at the Legacy evening.'" I exhaled slowly. Threads were starting to braid. That night, I sat at the long library table and arranged place cards with steady hands. Board chair to my left. Evelyn, discreetly, near the back. Investors along the wall where the portraits hang. Noah and Amy at the end of the table, where they could see every face, and more importantly, every face could see them. I slid Matthew's sealed will into the center drawer, the one with the tiny brass pull he greased every spring and joked would outlive us all. I rested my palm on the wood, and for a moment, the house felt like a chest that still held a heartbeat. When I turned off the lamp, the room fell into a gentle darkness that smelled of paper and lemon oil. The first battle was set. I'd played soft. Tomorrow, I would play steel. You have no idea what happened next. The evening of the will reading arrived wrapped in warm Texas twilight. The house glowed like a lantern, every window lit, every sconce polished until brass caught the fire of dusk. From the upstairs hallway, I could see black sedans and polished SUVs pulling into the driveway. Men and women stepping out in tailored suits, murmuring greetings into the humid air. I lingered on the landing for a moment, my hand resting on the banister Matthew had carved with his own hands when we built this mansion. I could almost hear him, steady, calm, telling me to keep my head high. "Play the widow, if you must, but don't let them see you falter." I descended the stairs slowly, not for drama, but because grief still lived in my bones. Every face turned as I reached the marble foyer. There were gasps, hands extended, murmurs of "Charlotte, you look radiant, and so strong, so soon." They mistook my composure for courage. In truth, it was strategy. Noah and Amy arrived fashionably late, as I expected. They swept in like royalty returning to a court. Noah in a navy suit too sharp for mourning. Amy in a champagne silk dress that whispered money with every step. Their smiles were wide, their eyes scanning the room for allies. "Mother," Noah said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. His cologne was strong, like he wanted to smother the scent of doubt. "You're glowing," Amy added, her voice a little too sweet. I clasped their hands with both of mine and whispered just loud enough, "I'm so grateful you're here." They believed me. Guests milled in the great room where portraits of Matthew and me hung over the fireplace. Glasses clinked, polite laughter rose, and I gave short, soft answers to condolences. Meanwhile, Denise and Evelyn moved like quiet shadows, checking seating, ensuring the program sheets were evenly spaced across the long mahogany table in the library. John Hale arrived precisely on time, his leather briefcase tucked under one arm. He gave me a brief nod that only I noticed. That nod said everything. It's time. I stepped forward, tapping a spoon gently against my water glass. Conversations dimmed. "Friends," I began, my voice measured. "Thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight is not only to honor Matthew's life, but to honor the future he so carefully prepared for us. In his wisdom, he left instructions that must be read aloud, here, among witnesses." I gestured toward the library doors. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Noah and Amy exchanged a glance, hers calculating, his confident, almost smug. He believed the show would crown him. We entered the library, its shelves towering with decades of ledgers, novels, and contracts. The air smelled of leather and lemon oil, just as Matthew liked. I took my seat at the head of the table. John placed his briefcase beside me, clicked it open, and drew out a sealed envelope stamped with Matthew's personal crest. Noah leaned back, arms folded. "Finally," he muttered, loud enough for half the room to hear. "We can make things official." Amy reached for his hand under the table, her eyes glimmering like someone already counting diamonds. John cleared his throat. "By law, and by Matthew Dawson's clear instruction, I will read his last will and testament in its entirety. Interruptions will not be tolerated." The room stilled. The crackle of paper sounded louder than any voice as he broke the seal. "I, Matthew Dawson of Dallas, Texas, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The words unfolded like a slow tide. Bequests of keepsakes to friends, donations to churches and charities, a trust fund for scholarships in his name. Polite gasps followed each line, and then the tide shifted. "All business holdings, real estate, financial accounts, and personal property are to pass in full to my wife, Charlotte Dawson. She alone shall control Dawson Properties, free of encumbrances or contest. My son, Noah Dawson, is to receive a conditional trust of $100,000, to be administered under the sole discretion of Charlotte Dawson." The silence that followed was absolute. It was as though the house itself had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. Noah's smile collapsed. His mouth opened, then closed, like a man gasping for air. Amy's hand slipped from his, her face blanching to chalk. I sat perfectly still. "No," Noah said finally, the words scraping the air. "No, this is a trick." Amy shook her head rapidly, her voice trembling but sharp. "This is fabricated. He meant for Noah to inherit. Everyone knows that." John's voice cut through, calm but edged. "The will is notarized, signed, and witnessed by 3 parties. It is airtight. Matthew left no ambiguity." The guests shifted uneasily, glancing between me and my son, whispers beginning like wind through tall grass. Noah slammed a palm on the table, rattling the glasses. "You can't do this, Mother. You can't." I lifted my gaze to meet his. For the first time in weeks, I didn't play small. I let him see the steel Matthew always said lived in me. "It isn't me, Noah," I said softly. "It's your father." The fury in his eyes was a storm, and for a heartbeat, I saw the little boy he once was, the boy who used to run barefoot through our garden, who once held my hand at his first school play. But that boy was gone, buried under years of entitlement and Amy's poisonous whispers. Before the shock could soften, I placed my hand on the table. "There is more," I said. "Evidence your father anticipated we might need." Noah blinked. "What are you talking about?" John reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a slim folder. He opened it slowly, laying out pages for the board members and key investors to see. Payment trails, forged drafts, escrow attempts. Evelyn had pieced them together meticulously. "These documents," John said, "show a coordinated effort to misrepresent ownership, falsify authority, and attempt unauthorized sales of Dawson assets. The draft will circulated to Houston investors was not authored by Matthew Dawson. Metadata analysis proves it originated from Amy Dawson's laptop." A collective murmur rose. Chairs scraped as people leaned closer. Denise slid copies down the table with crisp efficiency. Amy's face crumbled. "That's a lie," she whispered. John looked directly at her. "Do you deny sending the file at 9:12 p.m. from your home office?" Her mouth opened, but no words came. Noah pushed back his chair, standing rigid. "You can't prove anything." But the proof was in black and white. And in that moment, the room shifted. The allies he thought he had, the investors, the staff, looked not at a leader, but at a fraud exposed under light. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "This company is mine," I said quietly, but the quiet carried. "It always was. Your father left it to me because he trusted me. And you, Noah, you tried to take it before the ground was even cold." Noah's fists clenched. His face turned red, then pale. Amy reached for him, but he shook her hand off. The room swirled with whispers now, judgment falling like rain. The mighty air had become a cautionary tale before their very eyes. And yet, beneath my resolve, my heart ached. Because this was my son, my only son. And though he had betrayed me, betrayed his father's memory, a piece of me still wanted to pull him close and whisper that everything could be forgiven. But forgiveness wasn't mine to grant. Not that night. What happened after left the entire room gasping. You won't believe what unfolded next. Noah's voice cracked with fury, echoing against the walnut-paneled library walls. "You think you can humiliate me in front of them? I am Dawson Properties. I've been preparing for this since college." But his words landed hollow. The men and women around the table weren't nodding anymore. They were flipping through John's packet, their eyes tracing numbers, metadata, signatures. And they were seeing the truth. One man, Mr. Carpenter, a real estate magnate who had partnered with Matthew twice before, leaned back in his chair. "You tried to use my firm's name to secure false commitments, Noah. Do you realize the liability you've created?" Amy tried to interject, her voice sharp but trembling. "This is just a misunderstanding. Noah was only—" "Misunderstanding?" Denise's voice sliced across the room. She had rarely spoken directly to Noah in public, but tonight she did not hesitate. "You authorized payments to Shell LLCs. You doctored authorizations. That's not a misunderstanding. That's fraud." The word fraud landed like a hammer. I watched Noah's shoulders stiffen, his face flush crimson, then drain of color. He glanced at Amy, searching for her steadying smile, but she looked away, her own mask cracking. "You're all wrong," Noah spat finally, but there was no conviction in it. John Hale snapped his briefcase shut with finality. "Noah Dawson, any further business actions you attempt under the Dawson name will be challenged in court. Effective immediately, the board recognizes Charlotte Dawson as the sole executor and controlling authority." There it was. Official, irrevocable, unshakable. The room shifted once more, not with shock this time, but with clarity. Investors stood, straightening their ties, murmuring quick excuses about early mornings and full schedules. They left in clusters, not wanting to be associated with Noah's downfall. Amy's cheeks burned. She tugged at Noah's sleeve. "Let's go," she hissed. "We've lost this battle. Don't make it worse." But Noah wasn't ready to retreat. He turned on me, his eyes blazing, tears gathering in their corners, though he refused to let them fall. "You stole my life," he whispered. "You and Dad both. You never believed in me." The words sliced deeper than I expected. For a moment, my heart stumbled. I wanted to reach out, to remind him of the countless nights I sat with him when he was sick as a child, of the birthday cakes I baked, of the way Matthew dreamed he'd one day lead with honor. But Matthew had been right. Noah wasn't ready, and tonight proved it. "This was never yours to steal," I said softly. "It was always ours to build, and you chose greed over family." His jaw clenched. He shoved his chair back so hard it scraped across the floor, then stormed out, Amy trailing behind. The heavy library doors slammed shut, rattling the glass. The silence that followed was suffocating. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided my eyes. But Denise touched my shoulder gently. "You did what had to be done, Charlotte." I nodded, though my throat ached. The next morning, the fallout began. Phones rang nonstop, partners demanding clarity, lenders asking for confirmations, staff needing assurance. I gave it all, calm and measured, projecting a steadiness I didn't fully feel. Behind the scenes, John filed emergency injunctions, Evelyn compiled a dossier for potential prosecution, and Denise restructured the cash flow approvals. Noah, however, didn't go quiet. By afternoon, whispers reached me that he was calling secondary investors, insisting the will had been faked, claiming he had the real version. Some believed him for a moment, but when they checked with our office, we provided notarized evidence. His credibility unraveled faster than he realized. Amy, meanwhile, stopped answering his calls. Within a week, she had packed a bag and left for New York, retreating into the safety of her maiden name. And Noah? He was alone. One evening, a week after the disastrous reading, I found him on the steps of our mansion. His tie was loose, his suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. For the first time in years, he looked like a boy instead of a man. "Mom," he said hoarsely when I opened the door. "Just talk to me." I hesitated. My instincts as a mother battled with my instincts as a survivor. He had nearly destroyed everything Matthew and I had built. He had mocked my age, my strength, my very identity. And yet, he was still my son. I stepped outside, closing the door gently behind me. "You wanted everything handed to you," I said quietly. "And when it wasn't, you tried to take it by force. Why?" He dropped his gaze. "Because I thought I was supposed to. That's what success meant. That's what Dad wanted." "No," I said firmly, my voice trembling with truth. "What your father wanted was for you to earn it, to fight for it honestly, and you never understood that." For once, Noah didn't argue. He just sat there, silent, broken, staring into the Texas night. I walked back inside, leaving him alone on the steps. I didn't know if he would learn. I didn't know if redemption was even possible. But one thing I did know, this was only the beginning. Because Noah's mistakes weren't just personal. They had triggered something larger. Lawsuits, investigations, debts he had entangled us in without permission. The storm hadn't ended with the will reading. It was only gathering. And what came next tore open wounds even deeper than betrayal. You won't believe what happened in the days that followed. I uncovered a truth that shattered everything I thought I knew. Dallas mornings carry a kind of brightness that makes even sorrow look softened. Sunlight streamed through my kitchen windows, catching the silver in my hair, bouncing off the marble counters Matthew insisted we import from Italy 20 years ago. But that morning, light couldn't warm me. Because the phone hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters, partners, lawyers. It started before dawn, an email from the Dallas Business Chronicle. Statement requested regarding fraudulent claims made by Noah Dawson. By breakfast, 3 local channels had left messages, and by lunch, the New York financial press had picked up the story. Noah's downfall wasn't contained in my library anymore. It had spilled into the city, into headlines, into whispered conversations in boardrooms. When John arrived, his tie was already loosened, his face drawn. He dropped a thick folder on my kitchen table. "This," he said flatly, "is just the beginning." Inside were notices, pending suits from investors who had almost signed contracts with Noah, warnings from banks about suspicious activity, and a preliminary letter from the district attorney's office. Fraud, forgery, misrepresentation, words that glared at me like neon signs. I closed the folder slowly. And the company? Stable, for now, John replied. Denise is doing miracles keeping operations smooth. But Charlotte, reputation bleeds faster than money. If clients believe Dawson Properties is corrupt, it won't matter how airtight our books are. He didn't need to say it. I knew. Real estate was trust. Without it, contracts crumbled. By noon, news vans idled outside our gates. I watched from the upstairs window as reporters leaned against iron railings, microphones poised, their eyes hungry for footage. A part of me wanted to shout that they had it wrong, that I hadn't betrayed anyone, that I had defended what was mine. But another part of me knew better. Let them talk. Let them speculate. Truth takes longer to travel, but it never tires. Still, I couldn't ignore the ache in my chest. Because every headline, every rumor, carried the same name. Dawson. And that name wasn't just Noah's. It was mine. It was Matthew's. It was Ethan's, my grandson, who still toddled through life with a grin too wide for his small face. I would not let Noah's recklessness stain generations. That night, as cicadas sang outside, Denise called. Her voice was calm but taut, like a string pulled tight. They're sniffing for weakness, she said. Competitors are circling. Investors are asking if we'll dissolve. Some employees are nervous. Are they leaving? No, Denise said. Not yet, but they're watching you, Charlotte. They need to know you're steady. I thought of Matthew again. He used to say leadership wasn't about strength alone. It was about being the still point in a turning world. I didn't feel steady. My hands trembled when I put the phone down. But tomorrow, I would look every employee in the eye and remind them who built this company. Noah, meanwhile, wasn't done. 2 days later, a video surfaced online, grainy, filmed on a phone, showing him pacing in some anonymous apartment. His shirt was wrinkled, his voice frantic. My mother, he said to the camera, isn't what she seems. She manipulated my father, controlled his decisions, and stole this company from me. That will they read? A fake. I have the truth, and I won't be silenced. The clips spread like wildfire, shared on social media, replayed on evening news, dissected by commentators who had never met us. To strangers, Noah looked less like a fraud and more like a wounded son fighting for justice. And suddenly, the sympathy shifted. Not entirely, but enough to sting. John stormed into my office that evening, laptop open, the video looping. He's poisoning the narrative. We need a statement. No, I said firmly. We need evidence. Truth isn't argued, it's shown. Evelyn appeared the next day with a binder thicker than a Bible. Payment records, metadata trails, escrow attempts. Every lie Noah told, documented and dated. Release this, John urged. The press will bury him. But I hesitated, because as much as Noah deserved exposure, he was still my son. And Ethan, sweet, innocent Ethan, was still his child. To scorch Noah publicly would be to scorch my grandson's father. The war between mother and businesswoman raged inside me. One evening, after Ethan's bedtime story, I sat alone in the library with Matthew's photo. His eyes, frozen in frame, seemed to ask me, "What's worth more, Charlotte, the empire or the bloodline?" Tears stung, but I whispered back, "Both. Somehow, both." But I knew the world would not let me keep both. Because just as I set the photo down, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. If you don't step down, we'll leak everything. Signed, Dawson Insiders. My breath caught. Insiders. That meant someone in my own house, my own company, had turned. The betrayal wasn't over. It was only multiplying. And the secret that message hinted at was darker than anything I had imagined. You won't believe what I uncovered next. The truth lurking inside my own walls nearly destroyed me. The text on my phone glowed like a warning flare in the dark. "If you don't step down, we'll leak everything." Signed, Dawson Insiders. My first thought wasn't fear, it was rage. Not because someone threatened me, but because they signed it Insiders. This wasn't Noah shouting into a camera. This was someone inside my circle. Someone who shook my hand each morning and smiled as though loyalty still meant something. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The building was still wrapped in dawn silence, the hallways dim, the air thick with cleaning solution and humming lights. Denise met me at the elevator, her sharp eyes already awake. "I got the message too," she said quietly. She handed me her phone. Same words, same threat. "Who else?" I asked. "Not sure yet, but whoever it is, they know the timing. They want to pressure you before the next board meeting." We stepped into the glass conference room, where Evelyn was already seated with her laptop. She didn't waste time. We traced the metadata from the email server. The leak came from inside Dawson Properties. 2 accounts accessed files they shouldn't have, late at night, after hours. She slid a list across the table. My eyes caught the names, and my stomach dropped. One was Kevin Marshall, our operations manager, a man Matthew had mentored personally, who'd sat at our dinner table more than once. The other was Lisa Grant, the new executive assistant Amy had insisted on hiring weeks before Matthew's death. Kevin, a man I thought of as family. When I confronted him, Kevin didn't deny it. He just looked tired. "Charlotte," he said, avoiding my eyes. "I have kids in college. Noah promised me a stake if I backed him. Said it was only a matter of time before the will was overturned. I couldn't risk being on the wrong side." I wanted to scream. To remind him how many times Matthew helped cover his payroll when his wife was sick. How many times we invited his family to Christmas dinners. But I didn't. Instead, I said quietly, "You weren't on Noah's side. You were on your own." He didn't argue. He just lowered his head and left the office, his steps heavy with something that sounded almost like shame. Lisa was another story. She sat across from me in the boardroom, her hair immaculate, her smile faint. "I only did what Amy asked me to do. She said it was temporary, that Noah would reward loyalty." "Loyalty?" My voice sharpened. "You think betraying the company that paid you, that trusted you, is loyalty?" Her smile didn't falter. "Loyalty to the future, Mrs. Dawson. That's what she called it." For a moment, I just stared at her. It was like watching a child recite lines someone else had written. And in that moment, I realized Amy's reach had gone deeper than I'd thought. Even after the will reading, after the disgrace, she was still pulling strings from afar. I dismissed Lisa that day, but the damage was already done. By the end of the week, headlines screamed, "Dawson Dynasty in turmoil, and insiders claim cover-up." John paced my study, his phone buzzing nonstop. "We can fight this, Charlotte. We have the documents. We have proof of their lies. But once poison hits the water, people hesitate to drink, even when it's clean." I knew he was right. The city wasn't watching facts. It was watching a spectacle. One afternoon, as I drove past downtown, I saw my own face on the newsstand. A caricature, stern, cold, painted as the matriarch who'd crushed her ambitious son. And that hurt more than I expected. Because for decades, Matthew and I had built Dawson Properties with sweat and sacrifice. And in one season of betrayal, the name Dawson was becoming a scandal. That night, I stood alone in the library, staring at Matthew's portrait. "Was I wrong?" I whispered. "Should I have given him more? Trusted him more? Or did I do what you'd have done? Protect what we built? The silence didn't answer, but the weight of his gaze steadied me. I wasn't done. The next morning, Denise rushed into my office with a file. "You need to see this," she said, breathless. Inside were financial transfers, Noah's name tied to offshore accounts, routed through companies that didn't exist 3 months ago. Not just shady deals, criminal ones. "This isn't just fraud," Evelyn added, her voice grim. "It's laundering. The DA won't ignore this." I closed the folder slowly, my pulse loud in my ears. Noah hadn't just betrayed me. He had crossed into territory that could destroy him completely, and I was the one holding the evidence. For a long time, I sat at my desk, staring at those papers. My son's future, my grandson's father, Matthew's legacy, all tangled together in ink and numbers. If I exposed him, Noah would fall further than ever. But if I didn't, Dawson Properties would rot under the weight of his sins. It was a choice no mother should ever face. And yet, I knew the truth. The choice had already been made the moment Noah chose greed over integrity. Still, I couldn't escape the ache. Because justice for the company meant ruin for my son. And that ruin was closer than I thought. Because the very next morning, the police knocked on my door. You won't believe what happened after I opened it. The moment that followed changed everything for my family. Forever. The knock at the door was firm, not the kind of knock neighbors use, not even the kind a courier gives when dropping a package. It was the knock of authority. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee, the morning sun spilling across the polished oak floors of the foyer, when I opened the door and saw 2 officers standing tall in pressed uniforms. Behind them, an unmarked car idled, its engine still running. "Mrs. Dawson?" one asked. His voice was low, professional. "Yes," I answered, gripping the doorframe to steady myself. "We have a warrant related to your son, Noah Dawson. We'd like to ask you a few questions and collect some records." The words made my heart clench. Not because I hadn't expected them. Evelyn's evidence had made this moment inevitable, but because hearing them aloud, spoken by men with badges, made the truth impossible to ignore. I led them into the study. The room smelled faintly of lemon polish, the bookshelves lined with decades of Dawson history, contracts, family albums, leather-bound ledgers. It had always been Matthew's favorite room, the place where he planned every expansion with methodical precision. Now it was turning into an interrogation chamber. They laid papers on the desk, bank transfers, shell companies, wire attempts. Noah's name stamped again and again. "Mrs. Dawson," the older officer said carefully, "were you aware of these transactions?" I folded my hands in my lap. "Yes, I was aware, and I told my attorney the moment I found them." "Did you assist in these actions?" The question stung. "No. I protected my husband's company. My son acted without my knowledge, without my consent, and against everything we built." The officer's eyes softened for just a second, as though he understood the agony of saying those words aloud. Then he nodded, jotting down notes. When they left, the silence in the house was unbearable. I sat in Matthew's old leather chair, staring at the ceiling. It had come to this. My son wasn't just reckless. He wasn't just arrogant. He was a criminal suspect. I thought of Ethan, my sweet grandson with his wide eyes and endless questions. One day, he would ask why his father's name filled courtrooms instead of boardrooms. What would I tell him? That his father chose shortcuts over legacy? That greed consumed him before maturity could save him? Tears slipped down my cheeks, hot and heavy. I pressed Matthew's handkerchief to my lips, the one I'd kept since the funeral. I wanted him here more than ever. He would have known what to do, how to balance love with justice. But Matthew was gone. The burden was mine alone. By afternoon, news trucks were back outside my gates. Headlines screamed across the screens. Noah Dawson under investigation. Real estate heir faces fraud charges. Dawson legacy in jeopardy. I closed the blinds and sat in the dark, the glow of the TV reflecting off glass. They showed his face, my son's face, splashed across the evening news, his smile from some corporate gala now frozen as the backdrop to words like indictment and crime. Reporters speculated, analysts debated, and strangers judged. They didn't know him, not really. They didn't know the boy who once hugged me tight after nightmares, who once begged me to stay 5 more minutes at bedtime. All they saw was a headline. But I saw both. The little boy and the reckless man he became. And that collision tore me apart. That night, Denise stayed late at the office and called me before driving home. "Charlotte," she said gently, "you need to remember, this isn't your shame. It's his choices. The company is safe because of you." Her words were kind, but I couldn't fully believe them. Because in the public's eye, Dawson was one name. His shame and mine were inseparable. I walked through the halls of my house, touching the photos on the walls. Matthew shaking hands with city officials, ribbon cuttings, even family vacations where Noah stood smiling beside me. They felt like relics from another lifetime. I stopped at one photo in particular. Noah at 12 years old, holding a model house he'd built for a school project. His grin was so wide, so full of pride. Back then, I thought he might one day take Dawson Properties to heights Matthew and I could only dream of. Now, that dream was ash. But beneath the grief, something else stirred. Resolve. Because the police weren't just building a case, they would need me. They would need the evidence Evelyn had compiled, the testimony I alone could give. And if I hesitated, Dawson Properties could still collapse under suspicion. So I knew what I had to do. I had to walk into that courtroom, not as a grieving mother, but as the last line of defense for Matthew's legacy. It would break me, piece by piece. But I would do it. Because what Noah never understood was this. Family isn't about entitlement. It's about stewardship. And he had squandered his chance. The phone rang again late that evening. This time, it wasn't Denise or John. It was a voice I hadn't heard in weeks. Amy. "Charlotte," she said, her tone clipped but urgent. "We need to talk. In private." I froze. Amy, the woman who whispered poison into Noah's ear, who helped draft forged documents, who abandoned him when the scandal grew too large. Now she wanted to talk? "What could you possibly have to say to me?" I asked coldly. There was a pause, then a single sentence. "I know something about Noah that you don't." My pulse quickened. I wanted to hang up, to dismiss her as the manipulator she'd always been. But her tone, steady, serious, almost fearful, stopped me. "What do you mean?" She lowered her voice to a whisper. "Meet me tomorrow. You'll understand. And after you hear it, you'll never look at your son the same way again." I sat frozen long after the line went dead, the hum of silence loud in my ears. Amy had always been dangerous. But what kind of secret could she possibly hold now? And more terrifying still, why did I feel in my bones that she was telling the truth? You won't believe what she revealed to me the next day. The secret that shattered every illusion I still held about my son. It was a gray morning when I found the envelope. It lay on the front steps of my mansion, plain white, no stamp, no address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with block letters cut from magazines, pasted like some crude ransom note. Noah owes. He can't pay. You'll pay instead. My blood ran cold. This wasn't corporate sabotage. This wasn't gossip in the press. This was danger knocking at my very door. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house felt louder, every shadow longer. I had survived betrayal, humiliation, the law. But this was different. These weren't people who cared about contracts or courtrooms. These were men who wanted money, and they didn't care how they got it. Denise begged me to call security. John insisted on police protection, but a part of me resisted. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't my debt to pay. It was Noah's, and if he didn't face it now, he never would. 2 nights later, the danger became real. I was leaving the office late, the parking lot mostly empty. A black sedan pulled up beside me, its windows tinted dark. The passenger door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, broad, his face hidden under a cap. "You're Charlotte Dawson," he said. Not a question, a statement. "Yes," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. He held up a slip of paper. "Your son owes. He's not paying. That means you." "I won't," I said simply. "I don't cover debts I didn't make." His eyes narrowed. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then he leaned closer. "Then you'll regret it." The sedan pulled away, taillights fading into the night. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of whiskey. Matthew's favorite, the one he used to sip on summer nights. I sat in the darkened library and stared at the fire crackling in the hearth. I thought of Noah, of the boy he once was, of the man he had become. He wasn't just a reckless heir. He was a man drowning in lies, debts, and addiction. And I realized something then. Saving him wasn't just impossible, it was dangerous. Not just for me, but for Ethan too. So I made a decision. The next morning, I walked into John's office with every file Evelyn had compiled, every statement Amy had given me, even the threatening note from my doorstep. I placed them all on his desk. "It's time," I said. "Take it to the DA. No more waiting, no more protecting. My son must face what he's done." John studied me for a long moment. "Charlotte, once we do this, there's no turning back." "There never was," I whispered. A week later, Noah was arrested. The image of him being led out of his condo in handcuffs was splashed across every news channel in Dallas. Neighbors stared, reporters shouted, and for the first time in his life, Noah couldn't charm his way out of the spotlight. Amy was right about one thing. He had debts. And now, the people he owed would know he had nothing left. It should have felt like victory. But as I watched my son shoved into the back of a police car, head bowed, I felt only grief. Because no matter what he'd done, he was still my boy. And yet, I knew this was the only way. What happened in the courtroom after shocked even me. You won't believe the words I heard from my son when he finally faced the judge. The courtroom smelled of old wood and paper. Light filtered through tall windows, catching dust motes that swirled like restless ghosts. I sat on the front bench, hands folded tightly in my lap, as Noah shuffled in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his wrists chained in front of him. The sight broke me. For a moment, the years fell away, and I saw him not as a disgraced man, but as the little boy who once clutched a toy hammer, begging to help Dad build houses. But the boy was gone. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge, a stern woman with iron gray hair, read the charges: fraud, forgery, money laundering. Each word fell like a stone in the silence. Noah kept his head bowed, his once proud shoulders hunched. Amy wasn't there. His so-called friends weren't there. Only me, John, Denise, and a few reporters scribbling notes. When the judge asked if he wished to speak before sentencing, Noah finally lifted his head. His eyes met mine. For the first time in months, there was no arrogance, no charm, just exhaustion. "Your Honor," he began, his voice raw. "I can't deny what I did. I lied. I stole. I betrayed people who trusted me. Most of all, I betrayed my mother. She gave me everything, and I treated her like an obstacle. I thought I was proving myself, but all I proved was how weak I really am." A murmur swept the courtroom. I felt my chest tighten. Noah turned toward me, his chains clinking softly. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know, I see now. I see what Dad built, what you protected, and I destroyed it. That's on me, not you." Tears blurred my vision. I hadn't cried in public since Matthew's funeral, but in that moment, I couldn't hold back. The judge sentenced Noah to several years in prison, reduced for cooperation, plus restitution payments he would spend half his life repaying. It wasn't unexpected, but hearing it aloud was still a dagger. As the guards led him away, he gave me one last look. Not of anger, not even of despair, just of a man finally stripped of illusions. And strangely, I felt a flicker of hope, because sometimes hitting the bottom is the only way to learn how to climb. Months passed. Dawson Properties survived, stronger than ever. Investors returned when Denise and I proved our transparency. The headlines faded, replaced by fresher scandals. But the wound remained. One evening, Ethan came to visit. He was only 12, but his eyes carried a wisdom beyond his years. He sat beside me in the garden, the same garden where Matthew once planned our future. "Grandma," he said softly, "Dad told me to tell you something. He said, he's trying. He's working in prison, like real work, not deals. He said he wants to be someone I can look up to when he gets out." My throat tightened. I pulled Ethan close, kissing the top of his head. "Then maybe," I whispered, "there's hope yet." That night, as cicadas hummed in the Texas air, I sat alone on the porch with Matthew's photo. "I did it," I whispered to him. "I protected what we built. I protected our name. And maybe, just maybe, I gave our son the only chance left to grow." The stars shone steady above me, vast and quiet. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Because though betrayal had scarred me, though justice had been brutal, there was still love, carried forward in Ethan, in the lessons he promised to live by. And perhaps, in time, even Noah would learn the truth his father always believed. That real legacy isn't measured in millions, but in the strength to stand, fall, and rise again. You won't believe where life carried me after this trial, because even after saving the Dawson name, the battles I faced next tested me in ways I never expected.